Greetings from Chicagoland. This is Munira, the CEO and founder of Kismet Ventures. I have a YouTube segment called Munira's Musings. I am a John Maxwell certified coach, and I am on the verge of finding people that are bringing value to others. And I'm doing these interviews because I want to find these people and expose them and promote them. My guest today is Brian Cardoza from South Carolina?
North Carolina.
North Carolina. And he is an author and speaker. Welcome, Brian.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Thank you. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Brian.
Well, I'm Brian Cardoza. I grew up in Alaska. I was raised in Alaska. I grew up in Boston. And then I moved to North Carolina in 2006 to open a restaurant for a friend, and I have been here since. Since I moved here, I have written a novel, gained legitimate international artist status. I've sold art pieces all the way to New Zealand, to all the way just as close to Canada. And what I talk about is the power of choice.
The power of choices. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
So my book goes into about what happened to me as a child. I was sold into sex trafficking by my older brother from the ages of 6 and 9 to his best friend, and then physically and mentally abused by my mother and my brother till I was 12, and then just mentally abused until I was 15. And so what I try to explain to people is that I didn't have a choice in what happened, because for one, it already happened. And for two, all those choices were taken from me. I didn't ask to be raped. I didn't ask to be beaten. I didn't ask for the abuse that I got. But what I do have a choice on is how I handle those things going forward. For a long, long time, I was drunk, I was high, I was one thing or the other. And there was a literal choice of no longer hiding and trying to be numb, but trying to actually confront and face my issues and my fears.
Wow, that's quite a story. So you said you wrote a book?
Yeah, I have a book called The Unexpected Victim. It's on Barnes & Nobles and Amazon, and you can also get it on iTunes and Kindle.
Okay. So tell me I'm going to take you back. Is that okay? I mean, it's going to be much. So when you were 6, and how old was your brother when he did this to you?
He was 10, turning 11.
So do you know what was in his mindset? I mean, where is he now?
Well, he is on the East Coast, in the Northeast. And what was his mindset was, I was held directly accountable for my father's leaving the family. I was the last ditch effort from my mother to try to keep a nuclear family together. And when that failed, I was held directly accountable at the age of 6. And I detail it in my book because it's still something that stays with me to this day. And so he felt that I had rid him of his father, the person that he loved the most, and it was my fault that my father didn't love this family anymore. In those words, because that's what my mother had told me that had happened, was that the exact quote is, he left because you couldn't make him love this family.
So how did you get out of it?
Well, I got out of it because at December 14th, 1989, in Anchorage, Alaska, so December is not exactly the warmest of months, I got thrown out, and I lived in an abandoned car at the end of a street. And that first night, I literally almost froze to death. I just never went back. And from 15 on, I've been on my own. I've lived on my own since then. So for almost 29 years, I've been on my own. And in those 29 years, so many mistakes. So many mistakes. That to this day, like I still don't own my own home. You know what I mean? Like, and I'm still trying to overcome those mistakes because of them. But, again, it's one of those choices is that I could either dwell on what happened or I could learn to move on. So one of the things I came up with is this thing, and I talk about it in my speeches, is called bad math. And bad math is a linear way of looking at my abuse. And so, like, if I look at all the times that I was raped from start to finish, so not grooming, not anything after the trauma afterwards, just the actual rape. There's probably about 45 minutes of time in my life that I was actually being raped or molested. And it was about 3 weeks of time where I was actually physically getting beaten, broomsticks and coat hangers and whatever was available. And then it was about 3 months of time where the mental abuse was going on. Where, like, I'm being told by my mom, like, how lucky I was not been aborted and how much of a failure I was and all this kind of stuff. So I look at this time frame and I'm like, 45 minutes, 3 weeks, and 3 months. It dawns on me that I cannot let that be greater than possibly 70 plus years of life. Like, I can't allow 3 months, almost 4 months of time to be more than what the rest of my life has and what value it has. So when I started to think linear about the abuse, I started being able to put it in a position to where, yes, it happened. Yes, it's happening. Yes, I don't want anybody else to ever have to go through this. But you can learn to cope. You're never fully in recovery from trauma like that. You never fully don't think about it. But what ends up happening is you have more good days than bad days, and that's what matters.
Wow. So when you were in Anchorage, were you with your parents too at the time?
Well, I was with my mother. My father had left my mom when I was 6.
Okay.
He was still in Anchorage, but it was, so they were separated in two different households, and my father moved on quite quickly. So obviously there was somebody in the wings.
Okay, so was your mother aware of the abuse and the rape? And
my mom was the abuser, the physical abuser. My brother was the physical abuser. My father didn't care. If he had actually, I always tell people, if he had actually put a hand on me, it would have showed he cared. But he was out of the picture. And so my mom was my physical and my mental abuser, and nobody was aware of the sex abuse besides my brother and myself, and obviously my rapist. So almost in my 30s. Well, I did come out at 17, but I came out in a very harsh and mean way to my mother, and she just looked at me and she was just like, "Oh my God, you didn't tell anybody else that, did you?"
oh wow. Okay, so moving forward, when you were alone and you almost froze to death, when was that realization that you could make it on your own? And
Well, I still don't think I still don't know if I really fully believe that I can do that now. We all need help. We all need community. But what I will say is this: is that night I did have a realization. I could either literally just go to sleep and die and just give up, or I could go back home and beg to be let back into a house and give my mom and my brother more fodder to, rally at me. Like, oh, you couldn't even last a night, you're such a whatever. And, or I could just continue to fight, or I could just sit there and stay awake and keep circulation going, do whatever I can to, keep warm enough to where I don't die. And so that's the choice I made. And that was at December 14th, 1989. That was the day.
I really appreciate what you're sharing with us. But what I want to know also is that So when you decided that this was it, I'm going to be on my own, how, I mean, that was a change, a mindset shift, I had to say.
Yeah, well, that was precipitated by my mother being, get the hell out of my house. And then when she was like, get out of my house, the mind shift in my own head was, well, that's a pretty good idea. And prior to that, she had thrown me out probably like 7 or 8 times for a couple weeks at a time, a month at a time. But on that day, I think there was a continental shift in my own head that said, I'm not coming back. I'm done. And that's when on that day, that's what happened, is that, it was probably in her head, I'm just going to throw him out. He's going to come running back, and he's going to be a failure again. He's going to be this, or he's going to be that. And then I'll have my, abusive way with him again. I'm sure she didn't think of it as abuse, but, I'll be able to do what I want to him again. And when I didn't come back, it's funny, because if you were to talk to my mother now, and she's still alive, she blames me for not coming back. like her plan was to, show me how bad it was in the world, and how hard it was to survive at 15 on the streets. And when she threw me out, and I was just like, got this, like I'll make this work. That actually upset her more. So I always find that to be, humorous in the scope.
So how did you make it work? I mean, I'm curious about that, because now you're alone, you're living out in an abandoned car, and it's December in Alaska.
Yeah, what I ended up having to do was, I lived on the streets for about 2 years. Never fully on the streets. I had the support of loved ones. I had people that I would meet, and they'd be like, oh, hey, man, we got this place you can come stay at. And you can come here, and you can stick around here for a couple months, or you can do this or do that. So I became kind of like a hobo, going from house to house to house, getting food where I could. There was a lot of compassion from complete strangers that would take me in and let me sleep in their laundry room or whatever. But for 2 years, it was a strict on the streets, nowhere to go. And then in 2019, I decided that I was going to finish my education, and I went to Job Corps and got a GED, and was home for 10 months, and all kinds of stuff. And that's how I got by then. And then, when you're old enough, you can just start working jobs and start paying bills, so that's pretty much how it happened.
That's awesome. So I love the fact that you are talking about choices, because I've come up with my own segment where I say talk about choices, because everything we do in life is a choice. And the thing is, sometimes, I mean, in your case and sometimes in my case, where you don't have a choice and things are just planned out for you, where you don't have a say. And I understand that completely. So the thing is that what message would you tell people who are trying to figure out this message, or figure out if I have a choice or not? Because there's a lot of people who don't take that literally.
Yeah, I think the number one thing I would tell most people is, don't let pride get in the way. I find a lot of people that I talk to and I help to nowadays they have this divide on what pride and integrity is. They feel that if they ask for help or assistance, or get mental health help, or if they get any kind of help, that what they're doing is, they're admitting that there are shortcomings. When in reality is, your pride is just getting in the way. And you need to realize that the integrity of who you are is more important than if you feel slighted because you asked for a slice of cheese. You know what I mean? And going forward, your value in society It's going to be based on what you survived and overcame and what you decide to teach, not what your pride allowed you to do or not. And so I would tell people, don't get pride and integrity confused.
Okay, okay, that's awesome. That's awesome. So when you speak, who do you speak to, and what is your core message?
So I speak to survivors, and I use that term in a broad sense. In 2014 to 2015, I started a charity group called Survivor Nights. And it's Survivor Nights as in Knight, like Knights of Old. And we're a traveling art show. And the art is just literal survivor stories. And so we don't care if you survived cancer, domestic violence, if you survived a heart attack, whatever it is, if you use art as your medium, we want you to display your art. We want you to communicate your survival the best way you know how, and open up and have discussions with people that come to the art shows. And so when I did this, I found that, all right, so let me back up a little bit. So when I started Survivor Nights, it was because I was trying to hope to find other male survivors that would come forward so that I could have conversations with them about the things that was going through my head, right? So I start to do some research. I start to take a look at other ailments and calamities that happen to humans. And I started to realize that when you go through trauma, the top 10 to 15 things, no matter what your trauma is, we go through, whether that be the bartering, the negotiation, the pity parties, the depression. We all go through those same things. And so it dawned on me that if I was going to wait for another male survivor to come forward, I was going to wait a very long time.
True.
But I could talk to a cancer survivor about the barter system and about how when they were diagnosed with cancer, where they were just like, oh my God, anything but that, or I would do this for that. And because as a male survivor of sex abuse, we did the same thing. You know, we did that same barter. We're like, oh, please just take this away and I will do this. You know what I mean? Like, so I realized that I could have some very intimate and deep conversations with somebody who was a cancer survivor. And so I started Survivor Nights on that premise that I don't care what you survived. You survived. So come display your art. Come show it. Let's have a community. Let's talk about survivors. And so Survivor Nights' motto is that communities make survivors, but stronger survivors make stronger communities. And so those are the people that I talk to. I try to talk to the people that are going through an issue where they're just like, I don't know how to handle this. I don't know how to take this. And I come out, I explain to them what happened to me. Then we'll have some other speakers come up and we'll say, like, you know, here's how we did it. And here's how we've done it with this community. And so we try to encourage people to come forward and honestly think about their deepest, darkest, and know that in this space and in this facility, it is a free space to do that. There's no judgment. I didn't go through anything more than what a cancer survivor has gone through, and I didn't in a domestic violence survivor didn't go through anything more than I did. And it's a free space to where we can just talk about trauma and be free and have adult conversations.
That's awesome. So talk about the art that you do.
So the art that I do all kinds of stuff. A lot of my stuff lately has been in acrylics. I don't do the boring bowls of fruit in lighthouses. I do what people would call weird art. I do stuff that has a message, that has a meaning to me. If you want to see any of my work, it's on Survivor Nights on Facebook, or on my own page, briancardoza.com. And what I do is I do a lot of survivor art, but I do it in a way that is palatable for people, because I'm a big believer in the dandelion. People always look at me funny when I say, like, dandelions are they're the epitome of survival. A dandelion is. If you think about, like, how every year people go out and buy new poisons to try to kill this beautiful flower, and every year it finds a new way to survive. Like, you could put it on concrete and it'll still flower somehow. And when it passes on, when it's time for it to pass on, it becomes its most fertile and spreads its message and lessons to the new offspring by a child's wish, and so for me, a dandelion is probably one of the most perfect metaphors for survival. So a lot of my art has dandelions in it, or little secret message, hidden things about who I am and what I think is, and that's what most of my art is. I also do book covers for other authors who are survivors, because one of the hardest things to do is find a book cover that attracts you as the author for your book, and it could get expensive. So I will do a 16 by 20 inch painting, $40 or $50, depending on what kind of paints. Because like some of the paint I use is $9 an ounce. So it's kind of expensive paint, and I'll paint a cover for somebody, and it'll get on their book, and it'll let them feel like they were in charge of the entire process.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story. I'm really humbled and blessed that you came on today, and I am looking forward to reading your book.
Thank you. I can't express the gratitude you did for waiting for me, because one of the things I do locally is, have you ever heard of spin art?
No.
So spin art is, you probably have if you've ever been to a carnival. They probably called it something else. But they put a little piece of paper in the middle of a turntable. They turn the turntable on, and the kids will drop paint on it, and it'll just go in all these different directions. So I do that for the art walks here in New Bern and in Greenville, and I do it for free. And I do it for free because for sex abuse survivors, it's 1 in 4 girls, 1 in 6 boys. And on a given night, I will probably do 100 to 150 pieces for people. And at 1 in 4 and 1 in 6, that meant somehow, some way, I was helping a fellow survivor find something beautiful and create something beautiful. So I do it for free. And that's the reason why I was late today, was because I was getting all the, I have an art walk tomorrow that I had to have all the stuff ready for.
That's awesome. It's so valuable to me that you're instilling these values in others. But I love your message, the fact that people do have the choices, and they have to take the choices and, grow within themselves.
Well, but I think mostly what the most important message I try to explain to people is, even the choices
technical difficulties. Right. Sorry, say that again. We got.
All right, it's fine. Even the choices that have turned out badly, people have to recognize that they made a choice. That that it wasn't some entity's will, or it wasn't something converse to the fact that they made a series of decisions and choices that literally put them in that position. And once you start to accept that and realize that, then you start to realize that you have control over your better choices. You literally have better controls. Like, I've had friends be like, I'm trying to get better, and then they get a DUI, and they're just like, oh, but that was God's will, you held me back. I was like, no, it was the fact you had a 12-pack of beer before you got behind the car to go get some ice cream from the store. That you made 12 individual choices through the night, and then made a 13th one that was precipitously worse, and got caught for it. That had nothing to do with God's will. That had nothing to do with some evil curse against you. It was the 13 choices you made up to that point. And you have to accept those choices and then realize, like, yeah, you can go to the store and get a beer after you go to the store and get ice cream after you have a beer. Just don't do it after 13. You know what I mean? Like it's, and you have to accept these choices, and you have to accept the fact that you've had a hand in your choices from the traumatic events going forward. You've had a choice in those. And that's where I think most people get a little bit off when they think about choice, is that they automatically want to mitigate their responsibility for any of the wrong that's happened to them. Like I openly admit, from 12 to 15, when the mental abuse was at its worst, I was sometimes giving worse than I got. You know what I mean? Like, I was fighting back. I was starting to learn that this was not how 12-year-olds were treated. And so my mom, my favorite story is, I was going to go out one night, and my mom was like, bring your butt home by 7:30. I went out, and I came home, she said 8 o'clock, sorry. She was like, be home by 8 o'clock. I was like, all right. So I came back at 7:30 in the morning. My mom was upset, threatening to kill me and throw me out, and, telling me how fortunate I was I had her as a mother and all this kind of stuff. And as she's about ready to start hitting me, I look at her and I say, you didn't say AM or PM when you told me to be back. I'm early. And just walked away from her. So I mean, like I made a choice that night that I was going to start fighting back. And yes, I did, I had to handle some heat on the way back, but that was still a choice. And it may have precipitated even more abuse going forward, but I still made that choice.
That's funny. I guess if you're my generation, and I'm dating myself, that you weren't, my parents never believed in sparing the rod.
Yeah.
But, and so you did get it, and, but the thing was that it was the norm. Now, I don't have a problem sometimes if you have to smack a kid. I don't have a problem with that.
Yeah.
I don't believe in capital punishment, right? Because you don't almost kill a child.
Yeah.
So, so you have to bring it home. But these days, it's looked upon and frowned upon it as completely a no-no. And we have different views on that, and
you have different cultural views. You have different age philosophies and cultures that grew up in their societies. But now we know the traumatic events that happen within the brain and how the brain responds to trauma, to where we know that what we viewed as earlier children, as earlier adults and humans, and some of that was over the top, and some of that was not beneficial to a child's upbringing and growth. Now, I'm with you in regards to, like, I do believe a child needs discipline. I do know that at the level I was receiving it, it was a bit much.
Well, thank you again so much, Brian, for coming and attending with us. I really appreciate it. And I appreciate your message. And I hope that people who listen to this will subscribe to my channel and will like and share this video, because the thing is, there's a message in here where regardless of whatever things happen to you, you still have a choice to either come out of it or make the best of it, And I'm not saying suffer in silence. I'm saying make a choice to get out of it.
Yep. Make a choice, just take a stand.
Yes. Thank you so much, Brian. Have a good day.
You too. Thank you.